You know what I've learned about loneliness? The elderly woman's voice was barely above a whisper as she traced the rim of her teacup. It's not the absence of people. It's the absence of being truly seen. 26-year-old Jennifer Reed paused, balancing 3 plates along her forearm, and something in those words pierced through the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. She'd been working double shifts at Maggie's diner for 2 years now, ever since the accident had left her responsible for Marcus's college tuition. And she'd learned to read the silence between what people said aloud. Chamomile tea, 2 lumps of sugar, Jennifer said softly, setting down the worn ceramic cup she'd already prepared. And the lemon cake, because Tuesdays are hard enough without skipping the small joys. Rose Davidson looked up from her corner booth by the window, her silver hair catching the afternoon light, and her pale blue eyes glistened. You remember. Week after week, you always remember. Everyone deserves that much, Mrs. Davidson. That was 6 months ago. Since then, Rose had become woven into the fabric of Jennifer's days. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons at 2 p.m. sharp, always in that same rose-colored cardigan despite Chicago's sweltering summers, always with stories that started but never quite finished. Stories about a brilliant boy who'd made terrible choices. About a husband lost to violence decades ago. About waiting for redemption that might never come. Jennifer had learned to hear the weight behind Rose's elegant posture, the grief hidden beneath her perfect manners. She'd learned that some people carried their loneliness like heirloom jewelry, beautiful, precious, and impossibly heavy. Which is why, when the bell above the diner door chimed that particular Tuesday and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees, Jennifer's first instinct was to look toward Rose's table. The diner went silent, not the comfortable quiet of a slow afternoon, but the suffocating silence of prey recognizing a predator. Victor Davidson stood in the doorway, flanked by 4 men in dark suits whose jackets couldn't quite conceal what they carried. Jennifer recognized him instantly from the news reports, from the whispered warnings in Little Italy, from the way every muscle in the room tensed simultaneously. Chicago's most feared Mafia boss surveyed Maggie's diner like he owned it, because men like him owned everything. But then Jennifer watched something impossible happen. Victor's cold expression cracked. His hands trembled. And this dangerous man, this architect of violence, walked past every table and stopped at Rose's corner booth, by the window. He stood there, a grown man crumbling, and spoke one word that shattered Jennifer's understanding of everything. Mama. If you're ready to enjoy this story, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Your support helps us in creating more amazing stories, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's jump right into the story. 6 months earlier, Jennifer had been refilling salt shakers during the afternoon lull when the woman first walked in. She moved like she was carrying something fragile inside herself, shoulders back, chin high, but with a carefulness that suggested years of practice holding broken pieces together. Her silver hair was styled in soft waves that belonged to a different era, and despite the June heat making the diner's ancient air conditioner wheeze, she wore a rose-colored cardigan buttoned to her throat. The woman paused just inside the doorway, surveying the scattered tables with an expression Jennifer couldn't quite read. Not judgment, exactly. More like someone returning to a place they'd once known but finding it altered beyond recognition. Sit anywhere you'd like, Jennifer called out, gesturing with a salt shaker still in her hand. The woman chose the corner booth by the window, the one with the cracked vinyl seat that most customers avoided. She settled in with deliberate precision, smoothing her cardigan, placing her leather handbag on the bench beside her, arranging herself just so. Jennifer grabbed a menu and water glass, already cataloging details the way she'd learned to do. No wedding ring, but a pale indent on her left hand where one had lived for decades. Expensive handbag, but shoes that had been resoled twice. Hands that trembled slightly when she accepted the menu, though her voice was steady when she ordered. Chamomile tea, please. And, do you have lemon cake? We do, Jennifer said, writing it down even though Tony only made 1 dessert per day and she'd already memorized it. 2 slices left. You got lucky. Luck. The word hung between them like a question the woman wasn't quite asking. Yes, I suppose I did. When Jennifer returned with the order, the woman was staring out the window at the street beyond, watching pedestrians pass with an intensity that suggested she was looking for someone who would never appear. First time at Maggie's? Jennifer asked, setting down the teacup. First time in 40 years, the woman said softly. Then, as if realizing she'd revealed too much, she smiled, a practiced expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. The neighborhood has changed. Everything changes. Jennifer surprised herself by lingering. Something about this woman's loneliness felt different from the usual solitary diners. Heavier. More deliberate. I'm Jennifer, by the way. Rose. The woman's smile warmed fractionally. Rose Davidson. She came back 2 days later. Same time, same booth, same order. And again the following Tuesday. By the third week, Jennifer had her tea steeping before Rose walked through the door. You remembered, Rose said, and this time her smile reached her eyes. Everyone deserves that much, Jennifer replied, and meant it. Rose folded her hands around the warm cup, and for just a moment, her careful composure cracked enough for Jennifer to glimpse the vast, echoing loneliness beneath. That was how it started. With chamomile tea and the small mercy of being remembered in a world that had learned to forget. The stories came in fragments, like shards of glass scattered across months of Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Rose never told them in order. She'd be stirring sugar into her tea when she'd mention, almost casually, my husband loved this neighborhood before it took him from me. Or she'd be watching the street outside when she'd add, 40 years this December. They said it was random violence, but nothing in that world is ever random. Jennifer learned not to push. She'd simply refill the teacup, bring fresh lemon cake, and wait. The silence between them became a kind of trust. We had a son, Rose said one rainy October afternoon, her fingers trembling more than usual around her cup. Brilliant boy. Could have been anything, a doctor, a lawyer, anything at all. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. He chose to be exactly what killed his father. Jennifer felt the words settle in her chest like stones. She slid into the booth across from Rose, something she'd never done before, and reached across to still those shaking hands. I'm sorry, she said, because what else was there? Rose's eyes glistened. I begged him. On my knees, I begged him to walk away. He looked at me with his father's eyes and said the family needed him. She laughed, but it was a broken sound. 30 years, Jennifer. 30 years I've been sitting in that apartment in Lincoln Park, waiting for a knock on the door that never comes. The afternoon light caught the tears on Rose's cheeks, and Jennifer understood then that some people don't just carry grief, they become it, wrapping it around themselves until it's indistinguishable from their bones. My parents died 2 years ago, Jennifer heard herself say. The words surprised her. She never talked about this. Car accident on the Kennedy. They were coming home from Marcus's high school graduation. Rose squeezed her hand. I was supposed to start Northwestern that fall. Had a scholarship, everything planned. Jennifer watched the rain streak down the window. Instead, I buried them on a Tuesday and started working doubles by Friday. Because Marcus still had college ahead of him, and someone had to make sure he got there. You gave up your dream for your brother. It wasn't a choice. Jennifer met Rose's eyes. It was what love looks like when everything else falls apart. Rose nodded slowly, understanding passing between them without need for more words. They were both women who'd learned that love often demanded everything and promised nothing in return. That duty could be both prison and purpose. That some losses hollow you out so completely, you spend the rest of your life learning to live as an echo of who you might have been. Does it get easier? Jennifer asked. Rose considered this, her thumb tracing the rim of her teacup in that familiar gesture. No, dear. But you get stronger. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you find someone who remembers how you take your tea. Outside, the rain continued to fall on Little Italy, washing the streets clean of nothing at all. The word hung in the air like smoke after gunfire. Mama. Rose didn't move, didn't blink. Her hands remained folded around her teacup with the same precise composure she'd carried for 6 months, but Jennifer saw the way her knuckles whitened, the way something shuddered behind her eyes. "You don't get to call me that anymore." Rose's voice was ice-wrapped in silk, each word deliberate and cutting. "You buried your mother the day you took your father's place." Victor Davidson, this man who'd made hardened criminals weep, whose name was whispered like a curse in Little Italy, crumbled. His face contorted with something raw and desperate, and he dropped to one knee beside the booth. "Please," he said, and his voice cracked on the word. "I just need." "You need nothing from me." Rose finally looked at him, and Jennifer watched something terrible pass between them. Recognition and rejection, love and loathing, all twisted together into something that hurt to witness. "You made your choice 30 years ago. Live with it." The four men by the door shifted uncomfortably, hands moving toward concealed weapons as if they could somehow protect their boss from this particular violence. "Mama, I'm sorry. I'm so." "Get out." Rose turned back to the window, her profile carved from marble. "And don't come back." Victor stood slowly, a man who'd forgotten how to be denied. He looked at his mother's turned back, at her rigid shoulders, and Jennifer saw him age a decade in those seconds. Then he turned and walked out, his men following like shadows, and the diner exhaled collectively. Rose picked up her teacup with trembling hands and sipped as if nothing had happened. But Jennifer noticed the tea had gone cold. The next morning, Victor was waiting in the alley when Jennifer arrived for her shift. He looked smaller somehow, less dangerous in the early light, just a man in an expensive coat carrying too much grief. "I need you to talk to her," he said without preamble. "Please. Tell her I've changed, that I'm trying to. I'm not going to manipulate her for you." Jennifer pushed past him toward the kitchen entrance. He caught her arm, gentle, desperate. "Then just give her these." He pressed a stack of envelopes into her hands, expensive paper that smelled faintly of cologne. "Read them yourself first if you want. I don't care. Just please make sure she gets them." Jennifer looked down at the letters, then up at this dangerous man who was begging for scraps of forgiveness. She thought about Rose's loneliness, about 30 years of waiting, about how love doesn't die cleanly but lingers like infection in old wounds. "I'll give them to her," she said finally. "But I won't tell her what to do with them. That's her choice, not yours." "Thank you." Victor's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you." He walked away, and Jennifer stood in the alley, holding letters that felt like they weighed more than paper should. Inside, she could already hear Tony firing up the grill, smell coffee brewing, the diner coming to life. She slipped the letters into her apron pocket and wondered what it cost to forgive the unforgivable. Rose stared at the first envelope like it might bite her. "I don't want to hear his excuses," she said, but her hand reached for it anyway, trembling so badly the letter slipped from her fingers. Jennifer caught it before it fell. "Then let me read it to you," Jennifer said quietly. "And if you want me to stop, I will." Rose nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. The letter was nothing Jennifer expected. No grand justifications, no claims of innocence. Just memories, Victor at 7, learning to ride a bike in Grant Park. His mother's lullabies. The way she'd made hot chocolate after his father's funeral, neither of them speaking, just sitting in the kitchen while the world crumbled around them. "I don't expect forgiveness," he'd written. "I just needed you to know that I remember. That I've carried you with me through every terrible thing I've done." Rose wept silently, tears tracking down her powdered cheeks. The letters came every few days after that, always delivered before dawn, always in Jennifer's hands by the time Rose arrived. They became a ritual within a ritual, chamomile tea, lemon cake, and words from a son who'd learned too late how to say he was sorry. But Rose was fading. It started small. She'd forget Jennifer's name, calling her dear instead. She'd miss Thursday, then Tuesday, then both. When she did come, her cardigan hung looser on her frame, and her hands shook so badly Jennifer had to help her lift the teacup. "I'm just tired," Rose said when Jennifer asked. But they both knew it was more than that. Jennifer found Rose's address in an old membership card she'd once used for a discount. The Lincoln Park apartment was small and immaculate, filled with photographs of a boy who'd grown into a monster. Rose answered the door in her nightgown at 3 in the afternoon, confusion clouding her eyes. "Jennifer," she said, as if surprised to find her outside the diner's walls. "Is it Tuesday already?" "It's Friday, Rose. When did you last eat?" The refrigerator held expired milk and nothing else. That night, Jennifer brought soup from the diner. The next night, medication she'd picked up from the pharmacy after calling Rose's doctor. By the end of the week, she had a key and a schedule, checking in before her morning shift, stopping by after closing, making sure Rose took her pills, ate her meals, wasn't slipping too far into the fog that was claiming her. She noticed the black sedan parked across the street on her third visit. Different men in dark suits, rotating shifts, eyes always on Rose's building. They never approached, never spoke to her, but Jennifer understood. Victor was watching over his mother the only way she'd allow, from a distance that felt like exile. One evening, Jennifer stood at Rose's window, watching the watchers, holding another unopened letter. Rose slept in the bedroom, her breathing shallow and irregular. The medicine bottles lined the counter like soldiers, fighting a war they were slowly losing. Jennifer thought about bridges. How some connected places that should have stayed separate. How others were the only thing preventing a complete collapse. She wasn't sure which kind she'd become. Jennifer was locking the diner's back door when the van pulled up. No headlights. Just the quiet roll of tires on asphalt and 3 men emerging from the darkness like predators who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. She fumbled with her keys, heart suddenly hammering against her ribs, but before she could run, hands grabbed her from behind. "Don't scream," a voice said against her ear, cold and professional. "Victor Davidson's little messenger girl. You're coming with us." She opened her mouth anyway, scream, prayer. She wasn't sure which, but the sound died when gunfire cracked through the alley. The men who'd been watching Rose's apartment materialized from the shadows, weapons drawn, and suddenly the narrow space between dumpsters became a war zone. Jennifer hit the ground as bullets sparked off brick, her hands covering her head, the smell of gunpowder burning her nostrils. It ended as quickly as it started. 2 of the attackers lay bleeding on the asphalt. The third had his hands raised, one of Victor's men holding a gun to his temple. And then Victor himself was there, emerging from a black SUV that had appeared as if summoned by violence. He looked past the carnage, past his own men, straight to Jennifer crumpled by the diner's door. "Are you hurt?" He reached for her, but she flinched back, and something in his face crumbled. "I'm sorry. God, Jennifer, I'm so sorry." "Who were they?" Her voice shook. "Castellanos. Rival family." Victor ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked exhausted. "They found out about my mother. About you. Sharks smell blood in the water, and He turned away. "I've made you a target." One of his men approached, speaking rapid Italian. Victor nodded, gave orders Jennifer didn't understand, and the scene began to dissolve. Bodies moved, evidence erased, the machinery of power cleaning up its own mess with practiced efficiency. "I'll disappear," Victor said finally. "Stop the letters. Pull the surveillance. Stay away from both of you. It's the only way to keep you safe."
"No."
He blinked at her. "You nearly died because of me. I nearly died because of your war. There's a difference." Jennifer forced herself to stand, legs still unsteady, anger burning through the fear. "Rose is dying, Victor. Actually dying. Congestive heart failure," the doctor said. "Maybe months, maybe weeks." She stepped closer, meeting his eyes. "She needs you, whether she admits it or not. And I won't let your war rob her of what little time she has left." "You don't understand what you're asking." "I understand perfectly." Jennifer's voice hardened. "I understand that your mother has spent 30 years alone because you chose violence over her. I understand that you finally came back and now you want to run again because it's hard."
She grabbed his arm.
"I won't let you do that to her twice." Victor stared at her like she'd slapped him. Then, slowly, something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or the recognition that this exhausted waitress possessed courage he'd never had to find. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay." The alley still smelled like gunfire and fear, but Jennifer had drawn a line in blood and chosen which side of it she'd stand on. Jennifer found Rose sitting in the dark, staring at the stack of unopened letters on her coffee table like they were evidence at a trial she'd already decided. "He's trying," Jennifer said, not bothering with preamble. She was tired of dancing around truth, of watching two people destroy each other with silence. "Isn't that what you wanted all these years?" Rose didn't turn from the letters. "You don't know what you're asking." "Then tell me." Jennifer sat beside her on the worn couch. "Help me understand why you'd rather die alone than let your son back in." "Because I know what he is." Rose's voice was barely audible. "What he's done. I know what he is too. I watched his men kill two people in an alley to protect me." Jennifer took Rose's cold hand. "I'm not asking you to forgive what he does. I'm asking you to forgive who he was, a boy who lost his father and made terrible choices trying to fill that void." Rose finally looked at her, and Jennifer saw something break behind those pale blue eyes. "It wasn't just joining them," Rose whispered. "That I could have lived with, could have told myself he was young, foolish, seduced by power." Her hands trembled violently. To prove his loyalty, to show he was truly his father's son, he ordered the hit on my brother. His own uncle, Jennifer. The only man in my life who'd survived that world, who'd gotten out clean. The words hung in the air like poison. Thomas was going to help us disappear. Had everything planned. New names, new city, a life away from all of it. Tears streamed down Rose's face. Victor found out. Saw it as betrayal. And she couldn't finish. Jennifer felt sick. "Rose, I didn't." He looked me in the eyes at Thomas's funeral and told me it had to be done. That family loyalty meant everything. Rose's laugh was broken glass. "So, I told him he'd killed the wrong brother. That Thomas was worth 10 of him. And I never spoke to him again." The apartment settled into silence, heavy with 30 years of unspoken grief. Jennifer thought about forgiveness. How some sins felt too large to absolve, how some wounds went too deep to heal. But she also thought about Rose's trembling hands, about medicine bottles multiplying on the counter, about time running out like sand through broken fingers. "One dinner," Jennifer said finally. "At the diner, after hours. Just the three of us." She squeezed Rose's hand. "You don't have to forgive him. You don't have to forget. But let him sit across from you one more time before it's too late. Let him try to explain the unexplainable. And if you still want him gone after that, I'll never mention his name again." Rose closed her eyes, fresh tears tracking down her cheeks. "I don't know if I can." "I know. But not knowing is better than never trying." 3 days later, Jennifer locked the diner's doors at midnight and set 3 places at Rose's corner booth. Outside, the streets of Little Italy slept, unaware that inside these walls, a reckoning 30 years in the making was about to unfold. She'd bought fresh flowers for the table, brewed chamomile tea, made lemon cake from scratch. Some bridges, she'd learned, required careful construction. Victor arrived precisely at midnight, alone, his hands empty of everything except fear. He stood in the doorway of the darkened diner like a man approaching an execution, and perhaps that's exactly what this was, a different kind of death, the kind that happened when you finally faced the person you destroyed. Rose sat in her corner booth, ramrod straight in her rose-colored cardigan, hands folded on the table. She didn't look at him. Jennifer gestured to the seat across from Rose. "Sit." He did, moving carefully, as if sudden movements might shatter whatever fragile possibility hung in the air. The silence stretched between them, years of it, decades compressed into the space across a diner booth. "I killed him," Victor said finally, his voice raw. "Uncle Thomas. I gave the order, watched them carry it out, and told myself it was necessary. That loyalty to the family, to father's legacy, mattered more than blood, more than love, more than you." He pressed his palms flat against the table. "I was 23, and so full of rage that my father was gone, I convinced myself becoming him would somehow bring him back." Rose's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. "I came to his funeral thinking you'd understand. that you'd see I was protecting the family. Victor's laugh was bitter. Instead, you looked at me like I was already dead. And you were right. Why now? Rose's voice was ice. 30 years, Victor. Why crawl back now? Because I'm running out of time to be someone worth remembering. He met her eyes. And because every terrible thing I've done carrying the memory of white gardenias on the kitchen table. Of you singing Stella Stellina when I couldn't sleep. Of the way you used to tell me I could be better than this world, better than father, better than everything that wanted to swallow me whole. Something flickered across Rose's face. Pain, recognition, the ghost of a boy she'd lost. You remembered the flowers, she whispered. White gardenias, every Sunday. You said they meant purity. Victor's voice cracked. I haven't been able to look at them since, without seeing your face the day you told me to leave and never come back. Stella, Stellina, la notte assai avicina, Rose murmured, the old lullaby trembling on her lips. I thought you'd forgotten. I've forgotten nothing. Every kindness you showed me, every time you believed I could be more, I've carried it like shrapnel, Mama. It's torn me apart from the inside for 30 years. Rose's hands shook as she reached across the table, stopping just short of touching him. I wanted you to be good, Victor. That's all I ever wanted. I know. Tears streamed down his face. I know, and I failed you. I became everything you feared, everything you warned me against. And I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm not asking for it. He swallowed hard. I just needed you to know that somewhere in here, beneath all the blood and the choices I can't undo, your son still exists. Still remembers. Still loves you. Rose's hand completed its journey, touching his cheek with trembling fingers. She traced the lines there. Age, violence, regret, and searched his face like she was reading a map back to someone she'd lost. I see him, she whispered. I see my son in there, somewhere beneath the monster. And Victor Davidson, who'd learned to never show weakness, collapsed against his mother's hand and wept like the broken boy he'd always been. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and endings. Rose lay propped against white pillows, her silver hair fanned across the sterile linens like spilled moonlight. The machines monitoring her heartbeat created a rhythm that was becoming increasingly irregular, a stuttering symphony that Jennifer had learned to dread during her vigil beside the bed. She's stable for now, the cardiologist had said 3 days ago, the words carefully neutral. What he meant was, make your peace. Time is running out. Jennifer had called Tony at the diner, voice shaking as she requested indefinite leave. He hadn't hesitated. Family comes first, kid. Always. Victor arrived every morning at dawn, before the nurses changed shifts, and stayed until visiting hours ended. He brought white gardenias that Rose was too weak to smell, but smiled at anyway. He read to her from books she'd loved, poetry by Neruda, old Italian folk tales, anything that made her eyes brighten with recognition. Jennifer watched the transformation with something like awe. This man who'd built an empire on violence became impossibly gentle in his mother's presence, adjusting her blankets with trembling hands, moistening her lips with a damp cloth when speaking became too difficult. Tell me about the lullaby again, Rose whispered one afternoon, her voice paper-thin. Victor's throat worked. Stella Stellina, la notte assai avicina. You sang it every night when I couldn't sleep after Papa died. You'd sit on the edge of my bed and stroke my hair until I stopped crying. You were such a gentle boy. Rose's fingers found his. Where did I lose you? You didn't lose me, Mama. I lost myself. He pressed her hand to his cheek. But you never stopped looking. The days blurred together, morphine dreams and lucid moments, laughter over shared memories and silence heavy with regret. Jennifer brought chamomile tea that Rose couldn't drink, lemon cake she couldn't eat, gestures of love that transcended their uselessness. On the 8th day, Rose woke clear-eyed and calm. She looked at Victor with something that finally resembled peace. I forgive you, she said simply. Not because you deserve it, but because I'm tired of carrying this weight, and I want to meet your father without all this anger between us. Victor broke. I love you, Mama. God, I love you so much. I know, baby. I've always known. Rose smiled, and Jennifer saw the woman from those Tuesday afternoons. Elegant, whole, finally unburdened. Take care of each other when I'm gone. Promise me. 3 days later, with Jennifer holding one hand and Victor holding the other, Rose Davidson exhaled softly and didn't breathe in again. The machines flatlined. The sun set over Chicago. And somewhere in that hospital room, redemption, costly and hard-won, became possible at last. The lawyer's office was all mahogany and leather, too grand for the modest estate Jennifer expected. Rose's will was brief. Her savings, what little remained after years of living simply, went to a women's shelter on the South Side. Jennifer smiled through tears, recognizing Rose's final act of quiet generosity. 2 weeks later, Victor appeared at the diner during the morning rush, a stranger in an expensive suit trailing behind him. "Can we talk?" Victor asked, and something in his voice made Jennifer's hands still on the coffee pot. They sat in Rose's booth, would always be Rose's booth, and the lawyer slid papers across the worn table. Jennifer stared at the words, without comprehending. Deed transfer. Trust fund. Her name repeated like a prayer she hadn't known to ask. I don't understand. Victor pulled a letter from his jacket, Rose's elegant handwriting unmistakable even through Jennifer's blurring vision. She wrote this 3 months ago. Left it with her attorney, with specific instructions. Jennifer's hands shook as she read. My darling Jennifer, you showed me that broken things can still hold beauty. Now I'm asking you to show others. Help Victor become the man I always believed he could be. Create a place where broken families can find their way back to each other. Love, Rose. The diner is yours, Victor said quietly, along with enough money to turn it into whatever she envisioned. I'm just the instrument. You're the architect. Over the following year, Jennifer watched Maggie's diner transform. The kitchen expanded to accommodate cooking classes for at-risk youth. The dining room became a mediation space on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, Rose's days, where estranged families could meet on neutral ground. The corner booth remained untouched, a memorial to chamomile tea and second chances. Victor kept his distance from the family business, appearing instead at community board meetings, fundraisers, slowly building something legitimate from the ruins of his past. He wasn't clean, could never be, but he was trying, and Jennifer learned that sometimes trying was the bravest thing a person could do. On the 1-year anniversary of Rose's death, they unveiled the new sign, Rose's Haven, a place for coming home. Jennifer stood beneath it, remembering an elegant woman in a rose-colored cardigan who taught her the most important lesson. We're not defined by our worst moments, but by whether we choose to reach for grace in the end. Inside, the corner booth held a vase of white gardenias and a brass plaque for those still learning to forgive. The bell above the door chimed. A woman entered, nervous, alone, carrying loneliness like a familiar coat. Jennifer grabbed a menu and smiled. Sit anywhere you'd like. Some stories end. Others simply teach us how to begin again.